In the second chapter of 10th class physical science, we have seen the examples for the chemical reactions, and have known about what is a chemical reaction and what is a chemical equation, how to write the chemical equation. Now let us see few examples for the balancing of chemical equations. Earlier we have discussed about why we have to balance the chemical equations, means what is the need of balancing the chemical equations. To follow the law of conservation of mass, we are balancing the chemical equations. Okay, now let us start the class with a simple example. Here one equation is given, chemical equation, that is sodium sulfate react with barium chloride to produce barium sulfate and sodium chloride. Here in the reaction, sodium sulfate and barium chloride are participated, means they reacted. That's why they are called the reactants. After the chemical reaction, new products are arrived. They are barium sulfate and sodium chloride. These are called the products. The products of this reaction are barium sulfate and sodium chloride. Let us compare the number of elements, number of atoms of each element in the reactants and in the products. Reactants, products and elements. We have to make a table to compare. First, let us compare the sodium element. In the reactants, sodium is there in sodium sulfate, but two atoms of sodium are there in the formula of sodium sulfate. That's why in the reactants, sodium atoms are two. Two sodium atoms are there in the reactants. And second element, sulfur. Sulfur in these two, only in sodium sulfate it is there, only one atom is there. That's why in the reactants only one sulfur atom is there, we have noted it. And oxygen, whereas oxygen four atoms are there in the sodium sulfate. That's why we wrote 4. And coming to the barium, in the barium chloride, one atom of barium is there. That's why we have written 1 here in the reactants column. And chlorine, 2 atoms are there. That's why here we wrote 2 in the reactants column against the chlorine. Now considering the products, barium first. Barium, here in the reactants 1 is there, in the products also 1 is there. Okay. Next, let us come to the sulfur. In the reactants 1 is there, in the products also only one sulfur atom is there. That's why we wrote 1 in the column of products against the sulfur. And oxygen, 4 atoms are there in the barium sulfate in the products. That's why in the sodium chloride it is not there. That's why we write 4 in the column of oxygen products column. Okay, now coming to the sodium. In the sodium chloride only one atom is there. That's why we wrote 1 here. And chlorine also 1 is there. That's why in the products column we wrote only 1 against the chlorine. Means now in the reactants 2 atoms of sodium is there, but in the products only 1 is there. That's why sodium is not balanced. Sulfur in the reactants 1 atom, in the products also 1 atom. When coming to the oxygen, in the reactants 4 and in the products also 4. In the whereas barium in the reactants 1 atom is there, in the products also 1 atom is there. Chlorine 2 atoms in the reactants, 1 in the products. Now sodium not balanced, chlorine not balanced, but barium balanced 1 and 1, oxygen balanced 4 and 4, sulfur balanced 1 and 1. Now we have to balance only sodium and chlorine. Sodium and chlorine. In the reactants they are more, but in the products they are less in number. That's why we have to raise the number of atoms in the products of sodium and chlorine. Okay, now to balance the sodium, let us consider first sodium. In the reactants 2 atoms are there, in the products only 1 atom is there. Okay, now let us multiply the number of molecules to become to obtain 2 atoms of sodium in the products also. For this we have to write 2 before the sodium chloride. Now let us consider in the reactants nothing is changed. That's why here we need not consider this. Let us consider in the products. In the products, barium earlier 1, okay, now also 1, sulfur 1, sulfur also 1, and oxygen 4, that is there is no change. Now sodium, as we retain the coefficient 2 for the sodium chloride, means we are taking the 2 sodium chloride molecules. In each sodium chloride molecule 1 atom of sodium is there. That's why now in the 2 molecules 2 sodium are there. That's why 2 sodium atoms are there, and chlorine also became 2. Now we can see that sodium balanced. Here in the reactants 2 atoms, in the products also 2 atoms. Now chlorine also. Here in the reactants 2 atoms, in the products also 2 atoms. By this all are equal in reactants and products. That's why it is called the balanced chemical equation. Balanced chemical equation we have obtained. We have arrived to the balanced chemical equation. Okay, in this equation we have arrived to the balanced chemical equation by writing only one coefficient, that is 2, means only one change. This is a simple chemical equation, simple chemical equation which can be simply balanced. Okay, we can see more examples which are not easy to balance.